NASCAR introduced safety cars to protect the drivers, but occasionally, these vehicles become death traps, almost killing the drivers and injuring NASCAR fans. Are safety cars safe or carefully planned NASCAR disasters? From cars going up in flames on tracks to furious drivers crashing into safety cars, here are 5 NASCAR safety car crashes that got fans talking. At number 5 is Chevrolet SS on fire at Daytona International Speedway. If your car catches fire while in motion, you know your life is at stake. Keselowski said the safety car fire incident was hilarious and weird. He doesn't understand how a protector seeks protection. Such a risk. A safety car is known to maintain safety on the racetrack, but the Chevrolet SS safety car couldn't get the job done. During a NASCAR Sprint Unlimited race in February 2014, it burst into flames while lapping the Daytona International Speedway. After a few minutes, the fire went out and black smoke began to ooze from the vehicle's trunk. At the time of the incident, the safety truck was on lap 55 of the 75-lap race. Even though the drivers, Brett Bodine and his co-driver, were able to escape unhurt, Brett and his co-driver may have escaped unhurt with Thanksgiving in their hearts, but it was still a tough week for General Motors because earlier in the week, there had been a recall on its 2005 to 2007 Chevrolet Cobalt and 2007 Pontiac G5 compacts in North America. This recall was due to the faulty ignition switches of the cars that led to 6 deaths. So, the fire incident only added more pain to the tough week for Chevrolet. Even NASCAR directed all the questions about the incident to Chevrolet. While explaining what happened on the tracks, Chevrolet said the car's trunk contained a purpose-built auxiliary electrical kit to operate the caution lights during the race. So, they concluded the fire came from the trunk of the car. Crashing with a vehicle that is supposed to keep other cars safe is an irony too funny. Unfortunately, the safety car was destroyed and everything about the race that day ended abruptly. Number 4. Juan Pablo Montoya crashes into a safety truck at the Daytona 500. Daytona experienced another horrifying crash with a NASCAR safety car in February of 2012. This time, Juan Pablo Montoya collided with a jet safety dryer truck filled with 200 gallons of jet fuel under the caution. Do you know what it means for a car to crash into a fuel truck of jet fuel? You should expect something terrible. This horrifying crash caused a massive fireball that burned the safety car and the fans were terrified. Despite the crash, Montoya got off unharmed but still staggered around the field due to the harsh blow he suffered during the crash. From the start, Montoya knew there was a problem with his car, and he would have done his best to avoid moving at high speed because it was apparent the safety equipment was against the rail of the track. Instead, he went at high speed, which led him to crash into the jet safety truck, which caused an explosion and brought the race to a sudden halt. In a statement, Montoya explained that he had told the officials something wasn't right when he left the pits. He said every time he got on the gas, it gave him an uncomfortable sound. I returned and checked all the rear end, and the official said everything was intact. I went straight into the 4th gear, but we still were slow. When I got on the brake to travel up, the car turned right and boom, I just knew I was in for a big crash. I thought we had everything under control, but we still experienced hell. The crash burnt the helmet and everything. Indeed, I experienced hits from NASCAR races, but this hit with a jet driver is a whole new experience for me, and it hit me deep. I wasn't expecting a crash as terrible as this. Number 3. Bubba Wallace picks a fight with Kyle Larson. During the South Point 400 on October 16th, Kyle Larson suddenly got motivated and decided to get into the finishing line by all means. Such motivation was a wrong one though, because it led him into a severe conflict with his colleague Bubba Wallace. It didn't just lead to a physical altercation, but in a bid to miss crashing into the safety car, Wallace lost control of his steering and crashed. Before the safety officials came to the rescue scene, Wallace got out of his car in the heat of the moment, furiously marched towards Kyle Larson, and shoved several punches into his throat. Well, that was a big hit. The safety car missed the crash and Larson nursed a punch instead. But NASCAR didn't tolerate such action because it went against the rules and regulations of NASCAR. The safety car driver was competent though. He was quick enough to control the safety car and prevent it from getting hit by the collision. In a statement, NASCAR said, "We don't want to see our drivers fighting. Everyone must learn to control their emotions no matter how hard it gets on the track." Wallace felt the heat of his action and issued an apology later. He said, "I compete with the passion to winning, and when I cannot, it frustrates me. I've learned from my mistakes of allowing my emotions to get the better part of me. For this reason, I apologize to NASCAR and to the fans." The crash didn't cause problems for the safety car, but it caused several injuries to the fans. According to NASCAR, 28 people had severe injuries. Number 2. Kyle Busch crashing in the safety car in New Hampshire. Kyle Busch has always had anger issues. One minute he's cool and the next he throws tantrums and burns bridges. This attitude led to a crash during the Foxwood Resort Casino 301 race in July of 2021. But what made Kyle that furious? Before the race began, it started to rain. The racers complained to NASCAR that the road conditions were poor for the racers to race through without complications. But NASCAR officials weren't listening and the race began in the rain. Other racers were upset, quite all right, but Kyle Busch, who finds it challenging to control his anger, decided to pour out his frustration in the middle of the race. He drove straight up to get past the safety car and make it to the finishing, but ended up colliding with the safety car driven by Dale Earnhardt and crashed. Within a wink, the race came to a halt. Busch developed an injury to his right leg, and an ambulance immediately took him to the nearby hospital for proper leg injury treatment. Even with the injury, NASCAR decided to give him a one-race suspension and place him on probation for a while. Hopefully, he will learn how to control his anger and act more maturely. They felt a little break would do him some good, but Busch didn't see any wrong in his actions and complained that the NASCAR race was threatening his life. However, after speaking with his coach, Joe Gibbs, he offered a NASCAR apology letter. As for why NASCAR decided to let drivers onto the track, it's possible officials wanted to get through at least half of the race before sunset. NASCAR must accept the blame for insisting on a race in poor weather conditions. Number 1. The crash that almost killed 5 fans. Austin Dillon's Chevy went flying in the night at the end of the last lap of the Coke 0400 on July 2015, bringing the race to an abrupt end. Dillon's car was torn in two and the engine of his Chevrolet began to smoke, wholly detached from the rest of the vehicle. Fans thought he was dead. Drivers thought so too. Dillon's appearance in that split-second craziness and wave to the crowd marked a fantastic stroke of luck and proactive safety elements for both the driver and the sport. 5 fans were injured while Dillon walked away unhurt. While speaking with USA reporters, Dillon expressed his disappointment. He said, "NASCAR is overstepping their boundaries, and I don't think it is acceptable. We sincerely have to figure something out. Our speeds are high, and I think people will do better when they race at a lower rate. With our high speed, we're struggling to make racing safe and fun for passionate racers. How is it good for someone to get on the racetrack holding his hands in his mouth and hoping he makes it through to the end? Too bad if you ask me." Furthermore, he said, "You'd get on the track and it twists you round and round with violent hits at every angle, which is very brutal. I always have to hold on to the steering wheel as hard as possible during the race." Well, NASCAR got what it wanted, and that's the end of it. Cars are at risk of getting a crash on the track and the drivers are unsafe. We complain about the same thing every day, but they don't listen. They're only concerned with the race. Honestly, they need to do better. Despite the crash NASCAR experienced, the officials do not joke about their races. They don't change the race, the start time, or even the fans' positions after a crash happens. NASCAR is keen on making its race significant, but they need to improve its safety procedures.